She drove a needle into a man's chest without flinching, without gloves, without a single word of warning, and every doctor in that trauma bay went completely silent. Not because of the blood, not because of the speed, but because her hands never shook. Not once. Nurses' hands always shake in moments like that. It's human, it's normal. Flora Montgomery's hands didn't shake because Flora Montgomery hadn't been a nurse for very long. For this quiet life before St. Jude Medical Center, before Oregon, she had been something else entirely. Something the 8 helicopters circling outside already knew. If this story already has your heart pounding, hit that subscribe button right now, drop the name of your city in the comments below, and stay with me until the very end. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning of the night everything changed. The night shift at St. Jude Medical Center began the same way it always did. Understaffed, overcrowded, loud in the way hospitals are always loud, not with voices, but with machines. The rhythmic beep of heart monitors, the hiss of oxygen, the distant clatter of a gurney rolling too fast down a corridor that was never wide enough. Flora Montgomery walked through all of it like she was walking through still water. She had a way of moving through chaos that her colleagues had noticed from day one, not speed exactly and not slowness either. Precision. Every step she took seemed to land exactly where it was supposed to. Every motion of her hands was complete, efficient, nothing wasted. Head nurse Sandra Chu had once said, half joking, half genuinely unsettled, Flora could perform surgery during an earthquake, and the stitches would still be perfect. Nobody laughed because it wasn't really a joke. Flora was 37 years old, medium height, plain brown hair she kept pulled back tight. No jewelry, no perfume. She drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and ate the same turkey sandwich from the vending machine every night at 2 a.m. She did not talk about her family. She did not talk about where she grew up. She had a small apartment 6 minutes from the hospital, and the only personal items anyone had ever seen in her locker were a stainless steel water bottle and a photograph face down. In 3 years, no one had turned that photograph over. Not because they didn't want to, because something about Flora Montgomery made people instinctively understand that certain questions had no safe answers. It was 11:47 p.m. when she first felt it. Not heard it, felt it. A low vibration beneath her feet, subtle as a tremor before an earthquake. She was in the middle of changing an IV line for Mr. Garrett in room 14, 72 years old, recovering from hip replacement when her hands paused. Just for half a second. Just long enough for Mr. Garrett to notice. "You okay, honey?" he asked. The man always called everyone honey. She usually appreciated it. "Fine," she said, finished the line, checked his vitals. Her eyes moved to the window without her head turning. Dark out there, cold November Oregon dark. Nothing visible. But the vibration was still there, building, slow and steady the way a storm builds before the sky actually opens. She could feel it in her sternum now. Low-frequency rotors, military grade. She had spent enough time near enough aircraft to know the difference between a news chopper and what this was. She set the IV bag down carefully, patted Mr. Garrett's hand. "Try to sleep," she told him. "You sure you're all right?" he asked again, squinting at her. "Perfect," she said, and she walked out of the room. In the hallway, she stopped, breathed once, counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 distinct rotational signatures. Staggered arrival pattern. They weren't landing together, they were positioning. She knew that pattern. She had helped design that pattern once a long time ago, in a life that was officially over. Her name was Flora Montgomery now, had been for 3 years. Before that, her name was different. Her face was different. Her fingerprints, and she was suddenly intensely aware of her own fingertips, were on record in databases that most Americans didn't know existed. She started walking, fast. Not running draws attention, but fast, the way she had been trained, the way the body remembers, even when the mind wants to forget. She needed the east stairwell. She needed the roof access code, which she had memorized on her first week here. Out of habit, she couldn't break. She needed Flora. Sandra Chu stepping out of the nurse's station with a tablet in her hand. "Where are you going?" "Bed 4 needs a gift it to Marcus," Flora said without stopping. "I need 5 minutes." "You don't look right," Sandra called after her. "You look like you saw a ghost." Worse, Flora thought. I heard one. She didn't make it to the stairwell. The ER bay doors blew open. Not from wind, from the pressure change that happens when a large vehicle parks close to a building and cuts its engine fast. Flora had taken 3 steps toward the stairwell door when the sound hit the entire floor. A wall of white noise rotors spinning down and then beneath it boots. Fast, disciplined, synchronized. She stopped walking. She turned around, slowly, because running now would be the wrong move. Running now was the one thing that would confirm everything. The first soldier through the ER doors was young. 22, maybe 23 eyes moving in that train sweep, left-right corners, exits threats. Full tactical gear. No markings she could see from this distance, which told her more than markings would have. Black gear meant a unit that didn't officially exist. She had worn that gear herself. Behind him came 4 more, then another 4, then 2, flanking the entrance, and then him. Colonel John Vance walked through the door of St. Jude Medical Center at 11:53 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, and Flora Montgomery's entire carefully constructed world made a sound inside her chest like a building being demolished floor by floor. He was older, more gray. She had thought about him maybe 10,000 times in 3 years, and in every version of him she had imagined he aged well, stayed sharp. She had been right. He walked with the same controlled authority he always carried, not aggressive, not threatening, just absolutely certain. The kind of certainty that comes from having made decisions that cost lives and being willing to live with that. He hadn't seen her yet. She had 3 seconds, maybe 4 before he would. She didn't run. She stood completely still in the center of the hallway and waited for his eyes to find her. When they did, he stopped walking. The soldiers around him kept moving, spreading through the ER, speaking to the bewildered staff in clipped professional sentences that were clearly designed to project calm without actually providing any reassurance whatsoever. Dr. Paul Hennessy, the attending physician, a good doctor, a decent man who had no idea what was happening, was already moving toward Vance with his arms slightly out, the universal body language of a man who wants very much to understand what is going on. Vance held up one hand toward Hennessy, a gesture that meant wait. Hennessy stopped. Automatically, because that kind of authority is not something you argue with. Vance looked at Flora. Flora looked at Vance. Neither of them moved. Nurse Montgomery, he said. His voice was exactly the same. Low measured, the kind of voice that never went up at the end of a sentence, no matter what it was saying. Colonel, she said. Her own voice surprised her, steady as her hands. A soldier near the entrance glanced at her. It's good to see you, Vance said. It was not good to see him. They both knew that. He knew she knew that, and she knew he knew she knew it, and in the long professional shorthand they had built over 7 years of working in conditions most people would never believe, the words meant something entirely different from what they sounded like. They meant, I found you. I'm sorry I had to, but I'm here now, and what comes next is not optional. Sandra Chu's voice cut through the ER. Will someone please tell me what's happening in my department? Nobody answered her directly, which was somehow more terrifying than anything else. Flora took 1 step toward Vance, then another. He met her halfway, a gesture she recognized, one of the very few ways he ever demonstrated respect. And when they stood face to face close enough that she could keep her voice low, she said, You tracked the prince? No, he said immediately. We tracked a flag on a medical license renewal 6 days ago. 6 days. She had renewed her license 6 days ago, and in 6 days they had found her and mobilized 8 helicopters and whatever unit was currently spreading through this hospital. She had been so careful. 3 years of careful. On 8 birds, John, she said quietly. You brought 8. Barnes is in critical, he said. We don't have time for Michael Barnes. Yes. Something shifted in her face. Not much. Barely anything. But Vance caught it because Vance caught everything. He's on the 2nd bird, Vance continued. Hemopneumothorax, suspected spinal involvement, unstable. Our medics have been keeping him alive for 4 hours. He needs a surgical team, and he needs it now. Take him to OHSU, Flora said. Portland's 40 minutes by air. They have a trauma. He won't survive the transfer, Vance said simply. Our medical officer gave him 30 minutes maximum. That was 22 minutes ago. The silence between them lasted exactly 3 seconds. You have a trauma team here, Vance said. You have the equipment, and you have... He paused. He looked at her for one long moment. You have skills that no one at OHSU has. I'm a nurse, John. "You're the best combat trauma specialist this country has ever produced," he said, and his voice didn't change at all, flat and certain as ground. "And you and I both know that a nursing license is the most expensive costume you've ever worn." Doctor. Paul Hennessy had been hovering at the edge of this conversation for the last 90 seconds, held back by the invisible force field of Vance's authority and his own professional uncertainty. But he was a good doctor. More than that, he was a stubborn one. He pushed forward now. "Excuse me," Hennessy said. He was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, the kind of ER doctor who had seen enough to stop being easily shocked. Right now, though, he was close to shocked. "I'm going to need someone to explain to me right now what is happening in this hospital. Who authorized Dr. Hennessy?" Vance turned to him, and Flora watched Hennessy absorb the full weight of that gaze and take a small, involuntary step back. "In approximately 7 minutes, we are going to bring a critically injured man through those doors. He needs your best trauma bay, your full surgical support, and whatever you can give him. I am asking for your cooperation as a matter of national security." Hennessy blinked. "National security? Yes. In Oregon? Yes." Hennessy looked at Flora. Flora said nothing. He looked at her for a long moment, at her still hands, at the complete absence of surprise on her face, and she watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. He had worked with her for 2 years. He had never been able to fully explain her, and now, standing here in the middle of whatever this was, he was putting pieces together that he had never known were pieces. "Trauma 1, he said finally. "I'll prep it myself." He walked away fast, already calling out to his team. Vance looked back at Flora. "I need you in that bay," he said. "I'm a nurse," she said again. "Flora." "Oh, it again, and I'll walk out that door and you'll have to explain to Barnes why." "He asked for you," Vance said, and the quiet in his voice stopped her entirely. "When he was conscious before we lost him the second time, the only thing he said was your name. Not Angel 6, not a call sign, your name. Your real name." She heard the past in that, the weight of it, 7 years of it, operations in places she could not name and conditions she had spent 3 years trying to forget. Michael Barnes, 29 years old when she had first met him, the youngest and most reckless member of a team that was not supposed to exist. He had called her the best in the field once in the middle of a situation where best meant the difference between 1 casualty and 6. She had saved him then. She had saved him twice after that. And now here they were. "How long before they bring him in?" she asked. 4 minutes, Vance said. "Maybe less." She looked at her hands. They were not shaking. They had never shaken. That was the problem. That was always the problem. She had spent 3 years trying to be someone whose hands shook, and she was very good at pretending, but the moment a real crisis walked through the door, her body remembered what her mind wanted to forget. "I need full surgical access," she said. "Whatever Hennessy has. I need authority in that room. Full authority, no questions, no hesitation. If I say something, it happens. From everyone, including your people." "Done," Vance said. "And when this is over," she stopped. She looked at him directly. "We have a conversation, a real one, about what comes after this, about what I am and am not agreeing to tonight." Vance held her gaze. "Agreed." "I mean it, John." "I know you do," he said, and something in his face, something that wasn't quite guilt, but lived close to it, tightened and then smoothed over. "I know." The radio on the nearest soldier's vest crackled. A voice tight with controlled urgency. "Alpha Lad Bravo 2 is on final approach. 2 minutes. Patient status is critical. Repeat. Critical. Get your people ready." The ER exploded into motion. Soldiers moved with trained efficiency. Nurses scattered toward positions they'd been quietly directed to. "Doctor." Hennessy's voice rose above the noise from Trauma 1 calling out orders to his team, who were moving fast but were clearly operating on the edge of their understanding of what was happening tonight. Flora didn't move immediately. She stood in the center of it all, this controlled storm, and she breathed one long, slow breath in, one slow breath out, and she let go of something she had been holding for 3 years, gripping so tightly that she had forgotten it was a grip at all. She let it go. And what was underneath it was not peace. It was not relief. It was the thing she had been born to do, rising back up through 3 years of careful burial, like a river rising through soil after a long rain. She was already moving toward Trauma 1 when the second helicopter touched down outside. Behind her, she heard Sandra Chu say in a voice that was barely a whisper, "Who is she?" Nobody answered. The doors of the trauma bay were still swinging behind her when the gurney came through the main entrance. Michael Barnes looked worse than she had prepared herself for. She had prepared herself for a lot. He was pale the way people get pale when they've lost enough blood that the body has started making brutal triage decisions about what to keep alive and what to abandon. His breathing was visible, wrong asymmetric, his left side moving less than his right, which confirmed the pneumothorax. There was a temporary chest seal field applied, and it had been applied well. Someone on that helicopter knew what they were doing, but well was not enough anymore. The medic pushing the gurney made eye contact with her for 1 second. His eyes said, "We did everything we could." Her eyes said, "I know. I've got him." She was already beside the gurney, already assessing, already 3 steps ahead in the mental map of what needed to happen, in what order, which systems to address first, which could wait, where the margins were, and how thin they were. "Flora," Barnes said. His voice was barely sound, more like the shape of sound, but his eyes were open, clouded with pain, with blood loss, with the particular desperation of a man who has spent the last several hours being held together by other people's skill and his own will, and they found her immediately. She took his hand. 2 seconds. Long enough. "I've got you," she said. "Knew you'd—" He didn't finish the sentence. His eyes didn't close, but they went somewhere else for a moment, somewhere inward, somewhere where the pain was loud enough to crowd out words. "Save it," she told him. "Save all of it. Right now, your only job is to breathe." "Bossy," he managed. "Always," she said, and let go of his hand. She looked at Hennessy across the gurney. He was watching her with an expression. She recognized the expression of a person reassembling their understanding of another person in real time, piece by piece, each piece bigger than the last. "Tension pneumo left side," she said. "Needle decompression first, then tube. I want blood pressure every 60 seconds. If his SAT drops below 88, we go directly to—" "I know what to do with a pneumothorax," Hennessy said, not defensive, just establishing. "Good," she said. "Then let's do it together." He nodded, 1 beat. "Who are you?" he asked quietly, just the 2 of them beneath the noise of the room. She was already reaching for the decompression needle. "Right now," she said, "I'm the person keeping him alive." And she went to work. Outside, through the walls of St. Jude Medical Center, 8 helicopters sat dark and quiet on the ground. Waiting, the way patient things wait. The way the past always waits, settled and certain and completely unmoved by the distance you have tried to put between yourself and it. Colonel John Vance stood at the entrance of the trauma bay, not interfering, watching through the narrow window. His face gave away nothing. It never did. But his hands, the hands of a man who had sent people to do impossible things and then waited to find out if they had survived, were pressed flat against the wall beside him. Holding on, just slightly, inside Trauma 1. Flora Montgomery worked. She did not think about the helicopters. She did not think about the past or the future or the questions she would have to answer when this was over. She thought about Barnes. Only Barnes, her hands steady as stone, her mind clear as cold water. The woman she had tried to stop being the woman-aided, helicopters had crossed a continent to find moved through the trauma bay with the absolute terrible grace of someone who had never in truth stopped being her at all. The first thing Flora asked for was silence. Not quiet. The trauma bay was never quiet, and she didn't want it to be. She needed the machines, needed the monitors, needed the organized noise of a team that knew what it was doing. What she needed gone was the other kind of noise, the kind made by people who didn't belong in the room. "Everyone who is not actively treating this patient," she said without raising her voice, without looking up from Barnes's chest, "needs to step back to the wall or step out of the room. Right now." 2 of Vance's soldiers who had followed the gurney in exchanged a glance. "That includes you," she said, still not looking up. "Especially you." They moved. She heard the shift of boots on tile, the quiet friction of tactical gear, and then the breathing in the room changed, less of it, cleaner, more focused. Hennessy caught her eye across the gurney, and she saw something in his face she hadn't expected from him this early. Trust. Not full trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The professional kind that gets built in real time in crisis faster than any other kind. "Talk to me," she said to him. "Pressure's holding at 84/50, he said. Not good, but holding. SAT is 91. It'll drop, she said. When I decompress, it'll drop before it comes back up. Be ready for it. I've done this before. I know you have. I'm not doubting you. She paused. I need you to trust me the same way. Another beat. Then, okay, he said, simple, direct. She appreciated that about him. She positioned the needle. Barnes turned his head toward her, his jaw tight with the effort of managing pain that would have put most people unconscious, and she met his eyes. This is going to hurt, she told him honestly, and then it's going to get better. Don't move. Never do, he said through his teeth. You always do, she said, and put the needle in. Barnes made a sound that was not quite a word and not quite a scream, something in between, something raw and immediate, the sound of a body experiencing acute relief and acute pain simultaneously. The rush of air confirmed what she already knew. She worked fast, precise talking to Hennessy in a low, constant stream, pressures angles the exact sequence of what came next, and he kept up with her, matched her rhythm, and she thought, good doctor. Real one. SAT is dropping, the respiratory tech called out. 89. I know, Flora said. Hold. 87. Hold. Flora, Hennessy started. Hold, she said. Firm, absolute. 85, 84. Barnes's hand moved searching and she caught it without looking, pressed it back down to the gurney. Stay with me, she told him. I've got you. Stay with me. 90, the tech said. Then 93. Hennessy let out a breath. Flora didn't. She was already moving to the next step. Chest tube, she said. Outside the trauma bay window, Vance hadn't moved. She could see him from her peripheral vision that still contained posture she knew as well as her own reflection. She did not look at him directly. She could not afford to look at him directly. Not yet. Not while Barnes still needed everything she had. It took 11 minutes. Later, she would not be able to tell you what she was thinking during those 11 minutes because she wasn't thinking, not in the way that word usually means. She was operating on something deeper than thought, something that lived below language, the kind of knowledge that gets burned into you through years of doing the same thing in the worst possible conditions until it stops being skill and becomes reflex. She had spent 3 years trying to bury that part of herself under layers of routine and anonymity, and now here it was rising up through all that careful burial as naturally and inevitably as breathing. When Barnes's oxygen saturation hit 97 and his blood pressure steadied at 102/64, Flora set down the instrument in her hand and straightened up. The room was very quiet. She could hear the monitors. She could hear Hennessy breathing. She could hear faintly the sound of someone on the other side of the trauma bay window exhaling slowly. Vance. Good, Hennessy said. Just the one word. He said it the way doctors say it when they mean something bigger, when they mean, I don't know what just happened here, but it worked and I am genuinely astonished. He'll need the OR, Flora said. Probably within the hour. There's hemorrhage risk I don't love and I want imaging before we move him. I'll order it. Hennessy paused. He looked at her over Barnes's now still form. Where did you learn to do that? She peeled off her gloves. Nursing school, she said. He almost laughed. It wasn't funny, and they both knew it, but there was something in the absurdity of the answer, the absolute audacity of it, that landed somewhere between them and cracked the tension just slightly. Right, he said. Nursing school. She turned toward the door. Vance was already pushing it open. The two of them faced each other in the narrow corridor just outside the trauma bay, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Around them, the ER continued its night nurses moving a patient somewhere down the hall, asking loudly about when someone was coming to check on him, the eternal background hum of a hospital that never actually stopped, and Flora and Vance stood in the middle of it like two people in the eye of a storm that only they could feel. He's stable, she said. I know, I was watching. Then you don't need me to tell you. No, he said. I came out here because I need to tell you something. He paused. The pause had weight. Vance's pauses always had weight. He did not waste silence. You were right. 8 helicopters was too many. It drew attention we didn't need, and I made a decision under pressure that I would probably make differently if I had the time back. She stared at him. In 7 years, she had heard Colonel John Vance admit to exactly 2 mistakes. Both times someone had died because of them. Why 8? She asked. Because the situation is bigger than Barnes, he said. There it was. The thing she had known was coming from the moment she heard those rotors. Barnes had been the reason, the real reason, the one she could not refuse, the one he had used because he knew her, but Barnes was not the whole reason. She kept her voice level. What situation? I need you somewhere safe to brief you properly. Not here. You're going to brief me right here in this hallway, John, or you're going to brief no one. She crossed her arms. You've got 2 minutes before Hennessy comes out that door looking for me, and after that I go back to doing my job, and you can take your 8 helicopters wherever you want. Vance looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Cardinal. The word hit her like cold water. She did not move. She did not blink. She kept her face completely still, and it cost her more than anything she'd done in the trauma bay. Cardinal is dead, she said. Cardinal ended 4 years ago when the program was dissolved. Cardinal was never dissolved, he said quietly. It was reclassified. The silence between them stretched. You told me. I told you what I was authorized to tell you at the time. There was no apology in his voice, but there was something, a tightness, a compression, the particular tension of a man who has carried a lie for a long time and does not enjoy having to continue carrying it in front of the person he lied to. You told me the program was over, she said. You told me it was the reason I could disappear. You said there was nothing left that could come back for me. I know what I said. Then you understand why I'm having some trouble right now standing here having a civil conversation with you. Flora. How long? She asked. Her voice had gone very quiet, quieter than the ER noise around them, quieter almost than thought. How long has Cardinal been running? It never stopped. She closed her eyes, 1 second, 2, opened them. Who else from the unit is still active? That's part of what I need to brief you on. Who else? Vance held her gaze. Reyes, Tanner, and Doyle. 3 names. 3 people she had worked alongside for years, people she had trusted with her life in conditions she could not describe in polite company, people she had mourned, actually mourned, in the quiet privacy of her small Oregon apartment when she understood that the program was supposedly over and that whatever they had all been was finished. They hadn't been finished. None of it had been finished. She had simply been removed, taken out of the equation, fake dead, which she had agreed to, which had been her own exit strategy, her own design, but designed on the premise that the program was ending, that the work was done, that the rest of her team was also walking away. Barnes, she said slowly, Barnes was injured in the field. Yes. Active operation. Yes. An operation that is currently ongoing. Yes, Vance said. And then because he had always been direct when directness was unavoidable, an operation that has gone significantly wrong. She heard it then. Under his controlled, measured tone, she heard the thing he was managing. John Vance was afraid. Not panicked. He did not panic, but afraid in the way that experienced people become afraid when they are dealing with something that has moved beyond the parameters of their planning. How wrong? She asked. He looked down the hallway, then back at her. One of your former team members is missing. Has been for 72 hours. Which one? Doyle. She felt it move through her. Danny Doyle, 34 years old. Dark humor, terrible taste in music, the most precise sniper she had ever worked alongside, and simultaneously the most aggressively cheerful person in any room he occupied. She had a memory of him, sudden and unwanted, laughing at something stupid on a transport flight, laughing so hard his whole face changed, and then the same face in the field, an hour later completely still, completely focused, unrecognizable as the same person. Missing how? She said. It was not a question, it was a demand. We lost contact during extraction. 48 hours later, we received communication not from Doyle, from the other side. They have him. We believe so. And you need... She stopped. She heard herself. She heard what she was about to say, and she heard what it meant, and for a moment the hallway, the hospital, the entire careful architecture of the life she had built pressed in around her with the specific weight of something that is about to be destroyed. I need the best person I have, Vance said, and the best person I have has been working the night shift at a hospital in Oregon for 3 years. I'm a nurse, she said, and this time it was not a defense, it was almost a grief. You're Angel 6, he said, gentle, almost gentle. You've always been Angel 6. I think part of you has known every day for 3 years that this day was going to come. She said nothing. I don't want it to be true either, he said, and she believed him. That was the worst part. She believed him completely. I spent 6 months trying to find another way. This is not me being careless with your life or with what you built here. This is me having run out of options. Down the hallway, a door opened. Hennessy came out of Trauma 1, glancing around, found her with his eyes. Barnes's pressure is up to 110, he called. Radiology is ready. He paused. He looked at Vance, then back at her. Something in his face said, I don't know what's going on, but I know it's serious, and I know you're in the middle of it. You okay? Fine, she said, the word again, the word she always said. I'll handle the transfer to imaging, Hennessy said. He didn't move immediately. He was giving her a moment, giving her the choice of whether to walk toward the trauma bay, toward the job, toward the life she had made, or to stay where she was. She looked at Hennessy, then at Vance. Give me until Barnes is out of the OR, she said to Vance. That's the time you have to brief me properly. Everything. Not the version you're authorized to tell me everything. Cardinal Doyle, the operation, what went wrong, and why. All of it. In exchange for that, I'll listen. Listening is all I'm promising, she said. Don't push it. Vance nodded, once. The way he always agreed to things fully without qualification, meaning every bit of it. She turned and walked toward Hennessy. He fell into step beside her as they moved back toward the trauma bay, and for a few seconds he said nothing. That was one of the things she had always appreciated about Paul Hennessy. He could read a moment. He didn't fill silence just to fill it, but after a few seconds, walking close enough that no one else could hear, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Ask, she said. Is anyone in this building in danger? She considered the question. Honestly, the way it deserved. Not right now, she said. Not right now, he repeated. No. That's not the same as no. I know, she said. I'm being straight with you. He absorbed that. The soldiers, are they here to protect us or to contain us? She looked at him sideways. Smart man. That was exactly the right question. Protect, she said. As far as I know. As far as you know, he said, and there it was again, that dry, precise echo of her own qualifications back at her, not mocking, just honest. Paul, she stopped walking, turned to face him. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. He stopped, looked at her. Okay. What I did in there tonight, I have done it before, many times, in places and conditions and situations that I cannot describe to you. The life I had before I came here, before nursing school, before St. Jude, before Oregon, was not a quiet life. I chose to leave it. I built this instead. I want you to know that I built this on purpose. Every shift I worked in this ER, every patient I helped, every night I showed up, that was real. This was real. He was very still. He said, quiet. The people outside want it to be past tense, she said. I haven't decided yet if they're right. Hennessy was quiet for a moment. He looked at the floor, then back up. The way you worked in there, he said slowly. The way you moved, the things you knew without being told, the decisions you made. I've been a doctor for 17 years. I've worked with some of the best trauma surgeons in the country. He paused. You're better. She said nothing. Whatever you were, he said, whoever trained you, whatever you did, I don't need the details, but I need to know one thing, and I need the truth. He looked directly at her. Is Barnes going to be okay? She held his gaze. If the OR team is good. They're good, he said. Then yes, she said. He's going to be okay. Hennessy nodded slowly. Then he did something she had not expected. He put his hand briefly on her shoulder, not romantic, not patronizing, just human, just the particular weight of one person acknowledging another, and then he dropped it and said, Come on, let's get him to imaging. They moved. Behind her, she could feel Vance's presence at the end of the hallway. Patient fixed a point of gravity she could not ignore, no matter how hard she tried. And underneath that, underneath the noise and the motion, and the immediate demands of Barnes's care, something else was moving. Something she had locked away 3 years ago in a small apartment in a quiet Oregon town, something she had covered with routine and anonymity, and turkey sandwiches from a vending machine. The part of her that already knew she was going back. The part that had known, maybe from the moment she felt those rotors in her sternum. She didn't let herself think about it directly. Not yet. She put it in the same place she put everything she couldn't afford to feel in the middle of a crisis. A locked room, a sealed door. Later, deal with it, later. And she walked into the trauma bay and stood next to Michael Barnes and checked his lines and looked at his face, which was less gray, now more present, more him. His eyes opened when he heard her step. "Still here," he said, barely sound. "Still here," she agreed. "Knew you would be." A pause. The effort of speaking was visible on his face. You never left anyone behind." She thought about Doyle, about 72 hours, about what 72 hours meant in the kind of situations Cardinal operated in. "Rest," she told Barnes. "I need you resting." "You going to come back?" he asked. His eyes held hers, clear enough despite everything. Clear enough that she knew he wasn't asking about tonight. He was asking about the bigger thing. The thing Vance had brought here with 8 helicopters and a name she had tried to stop being. She didn't answer right away. She checked his IV, checked his SAT, checked the numbers that told her he was alive and intended to stay that way. "Rest," she said again. And she moved to the door because the monitors were beeping for transport and there was a job still in front of her. And Flora Montgomery, whoever she was, whatever she was becoming again, was not the kind of person who left jobs unfinished. Not then, not ever. Barnes made it to imaging at 12:41 a.m. Flora walked alongside the gurney until the radiology doors closed between them, and then she stood in the hallway and did something she had not allowed herself to do since the moment those helicopters landed. She stood completely still and let herself feel the full weight of what was happening. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then Vance was beside her and the weight had to go back in the locked room because there was no space for it now. "Brief me," she said. She started walking, not toward anything specific, just moving, because standing still felt too much like surrender. "Everything you promised. Start with how Cardinal got reclassified and by whom." Vance kept pace with her easily. He always had. She was fast, and he matched her without effort, which had always been one of the quiet physical facts of their working relationship. Two people who moved at the same speed through hard situations. "After you exited," he began. "The program underwent a structural review, standard process after any asset transition. What the review found was that the operational framework Cardinal had developed, the methodology, the network, the contacts, was too valuable to dismantle. Command decided to continue under a different classification tier. Off book, but authorized. Authorized by whom specifically? Levels above my pay grade," he said, which I know is not a satisfying answer. "It's a dishonest answer dressed up as a humble one," she said. "You know exactly who authorized it. You just can't say." He didn't confirm or deny it, which was in its own way confirmation. "Who was running point after I left?" she asked. "Reyes took the lead role." She absorbed that. Elena Reyes, sharp, relentless, the kind of operator who made other operators feel slightly less competent just by being in the same room. Flora had trusted her with her life, had trusted her with other people's lives, which was the higher bar. "How is she?" "That," Vance said, "is one of the things I need to tell you." She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. "Reyes is the one who found Doyle," he said, "or found where he's being held. We believe. The intelligence is 60% confidence, which is not a number I love, but it's what we have. Where that comes after you agree to the briefing." "I'm in the briefing, John. This is the briefing." "The formal briefing," he said, "with maps and communications intercepts and the full picture. Not a hallway conversation." He looked at her directly. "I'm not withholding for leverage. I'm withholding because the information is classified at a level where I genuinely need you inside a secured environment before I can show it to you. I am not permitted to tell you the location in an unsecured corridor of a civilian hospital." She looked at him for a long moment. "You prepared a secured environment." "One of the helicopters," he said. "Yes. You were very confident I'd cooperate." "I was very hopeful," he said. And there was something in that something that was not quite an admission, but lived right next to one. He had not been certain, he had hoped. She had not expected that honesty from him, and it moved something in her that she immediately tried to move back. Barnes goes to the OR first, she said. I'm not leaving this building until he's out of surgery and I know he's stable. That could be 2 hours. Then you'll wait 2 hours. He nodded, not reluctantly. He had expected this, she realized. He had planned for it. There's something else, he said. She waited. Sandra Chu, he said, your head nurse. She's been asking questions. Specifically, she's been asking the soldiers at the entrance about unit identification and federal authority. She's smart and she's not going to let it go. Sandra is always smart and never lets anything go, Flora said. She's been that way since I met her. It's one of her best qualities. She needs to be managed. She's not a situation to be managed, Flora said, and she heard her own voice go flat and firm in the way it did when she was drawing a line. She's a person who works in this hospital and has every right to know what's happening in it. You will not threaten her. You will not intimidate her. And if any of your people so much as imply that she should stop asking questions, I will personally. I wasn't suggesting threats, Vance said, and he sounded faintly offended. I was suggesting that you talk to her. She trusts you. She'll take it better from you. Flora stopped, felt the slight embarrassment of having leaned into a fight that wasn't there. Fine, she said. I'll talk to her. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't let your people crowd her. She found Sandra at the nurse's station, 20 feet away, standing with her arms crossed and her expression broadcasting at full volume that she had been waiting for someone to explain things to her, and her patience was approximately 45 seconds from running out entirely. Sandra Chu was 61 years old and had been nursing for 34 of those years, had survived 3 hospital administrations and 2 major restructurings, and 1 actual riot in the ER parking lot. And she was not a woman who was easily unsettled. Tonight she was unsettled, and it showed, and Flora felt a pang of genuine guilt because Sandra's unsettledness was Flora's fault. Walk with me for a minute, Flora said to her. Sandra looked at her for a long beat, then she uncrossed her arms and walked. They moved into the alcove near the supply room, the one that had become their unofficial private conversation spot over 2 years of shared shifts. Flora had told Sandra almost nothing in those 2 years, had offered up careful fragments of a constructed biography, a backstory with just enough texture to seem real, and now she stood in the same alcove and tried to figure out how much truth to give this woman who deserved all of it. Are we in danger? Sandra asked. Direct first thing, no preamble. No, Flora said. Are you sure? Yes. Sandra studied her. You know those men. It wasn't a question. Flora answered it anyway. Some of them. The man in charge, the colonel, he knows you. Yes. The way he looked at you when he came through the door. Sandra paused. She had a way of constructing sentences carefully when she was working through something, placing each word deliberately. He looked at you the way people look at someone they've been searching for. Not just someone they know. Someone they lost. Flora said nothing. Flora, Sandra said. And she said the name the way she always said it, the way that meant I am not going to pretend I believe what you want me to believe when I can see the actual truth right in front of me. Who are you? The question landed the same way it always landed when it came from someone who genuinely wanted the answer. Not with aggression, not with accusation, with care. With the particular weight of a person who has decided that the truth, whatever it is something they can handle. My name is Flora Montgomery, she said. That is real. I am a nurse at this hospital, and that is real, and everything I've done in this building for the past 3 years has been real. All of that is true. But Sandra said, but before that, Flora said, I was something else. I did work that I can't describe to you in detail, and the men outside are connected to that work. One of them was injured and needed help tonight, and I helped him, and now she stopped. Now there are decisions I have to make. Sandra was quiet for a moment. Flora had expected questions. Sandra had about 40 of them, visibly queuing up behind her eyes, but what Sandra said instead was, the way you worked on that man tonight. I've been watching you for 2 years, Flora. You're a good nurse. Always have been. But tonight, she shook her head slightly. That wasn't nursing. No, Flora said. It wasn't. It was something you couldn't stop being, Sandra said. Flora felt that land in the center of her chest, precise and unavoidable, the way certain true things land when someone you didn't expect to understand you understands you completely. Yeah, she said quietly. That's right. Sandra looked at the floor, then at her hands, then back at Flora. Are you going to leave? I don't know yet. Are they going to make you? Nobody makes me do anything, Flora said. Not anymore. Sandra almost smiled at that. Almost. No, she said. I suppose they don't. She was quiet for another moment. Then she said, if you leave when you leave, whatever it is, I want you to know that every person who came through this ER on your shift was better for it. You were exactly what you said you were every night you were here. Whatever else you are, she paused. Her voice had gone softer. You were real here. Flora did not trust herself to speak for a second. When she did, she said, thank you, Sandra. Don't thank me, Sandra said. Just if it's the kind of thing where you can tell someone whether you're okay or not, tell me eventually. That's all I ask. I'll try, Flora said, and she meant it. She walked back out into the ER. The next hour and 40 minutes were the longest of Flora's 3 Oregon years. Barnes went into surgery at 1:08 a.m. The OR team was good. Hennessy had been right about that. And the surgeon on call, a compact, efficient woman named Dr. Park, had looked at the pre-op imaging with the expression of someone solving a problem she had seen before and knew how to handle. Flora did not sit down. She moved through the remainder of her shift because there were other patients and other needs, and the hospital did not stop because her world was upending itself, which was, she thought, one of the things she had always appreciated about working in a place like this. The work was the anchor. The work was always the anchor. At 1:24 a.m. something changed. She felt it before she understood it, a shift in the energy near the ER entrance, a quickening of the soldiers' attention that was different from the watchful patience they had maintained all night. She was at the nurse's station charting when she caught it, and she was halfway to the entrance before she had consciously decided to move. 2 of Vance's soldiers were in low-fast conversation with someone on a radio. Their body language was controlled but not calm, the particular controlled, not calm of trained people who have just received information that has elevated the threat level and are managing their response. Flora reached them in 12 steps. What happened? She said. Not a question. The way she used to say it. The nearer soldier looked at her. He was young, early 20s, and she saw him make the rapid internal calculation. Civilian nurse not authorized. And then she saw him override it because something in her voice and posture had triggered a different assessment entirely. Ma'am, he said. What happened? She said again. Colonel Vance is in the waiting area. I know where he is. Tell me what's on that radio. The soldier hesitated one more second. Then possible perimeter breach, south side of the building. Could be nothing, civilian curiosity, someone who saw the helicopters and got too close. Could be. Is it contained? We're assessing. How many at the south perimeter? 2 of ours. 2 is not enough if it's not nothing, she said. The soldier's radio crackled. A voice tight. Alpha lead, confirmed breach. South fire exit, someone cut the lock. Doors open. The ER went cold around her. Not literally, the temperature didn't change, but the feeling changed the way the feeling of a room changes when something dangerous enters it, when the quality of the air shifts from ordinary tension to something with teeth. Where's Vance? She said, and this time she was already moving. He came through the waiting room door at the same moment she turned, which meant he'd heard the radio too, or his own feed had told him, and the look on his face confirmed what she had already understood. The south perimeter breach was not a curious civilian. Who knows we're here, she said immediately. We followed protocol, he said. Radio silence at civilian airspace clearances. Standard operational. Who knows, she said again harder. Vance's jaw tightened. There was a communication gap when Barnes was extracted from the field. A window of approximately 40 minutes before we established full comms blackout. During that window, he stopped. Someone tracked the extraction, she said. We believe so. To this hospital. Yes. She felt it then, the full picture assembling itself in her mind with the particular cold clarity that had made her exceptional at the job she had left behind. 8 helicopters, loud and visible, drawing every eye in a 20-mile radius. A critically injured operative who had been in enemy hands long enough for his location to be triangulated. An extraction route that had a 40-minute gap. And now a cut lock on a fire exit at 1:24 in the morning. They followed you here, she said. You brought them directly to this building, John. To this hospital full of patients. Her voice was quiet, completely flat. How many? We don't know yet. Best estimate. Small team. If it's who we think it is, they don't operate with large teams. Precision, not force. That's supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be accurate, he said. Flora. Hennessy's voice from behind her. She turned. He was standing in the doorway between the ER and the main corridor, and his face said that he had heard enough. Maybe not everything, but enough, and he was doing what good doctors do, which is stay steady and deal with what's in front of them. Tell me what I need to do. She looked at him, she looked at Vance, she looked at the soldiers positioning themselves near the entrance in the fire exit corridor. And the thing that had been rising in her all night, the thing she had been holding back, the thing she had been negotiating with, the thing she had been calling a decision she hadn't made yet came fully to the surface. It wasn't a decision at all. It had never been a decision. The decision had been made years ago in the deep structure of who she was and the part of her that had gone still and calm when the helicopters came, the part that had never shaken, the part that remembered exactly what it was made to do. Paul, she said, I need you to quietly move every patient who can be moved away from the south corridor. Do it fast, do it calm, do not let staff panic. Tell them it's a precautionary measure for the military exercise. Can you do that? Military exercise, he repeated. It's the story that keeps people calm. And what's the true story? She held his gaze. The true story is that I need 20 minutes to make this building safe, and the best thing you can do right now is trust me. Hennessy looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. 3 full seconds of a man making a decision about who he was and what he believed and what kind of doctor he wanted to be in the worst moment he'd ever had on shift. Then he said 20 minutes. Thank you, she said. He turned and went. She turned to Vance. I need to know everything you know about the team that followed you here. Right now, in 30 seconds or less. Go. Vance looked at her with an expression she recognized from 7 years of working alongside him, the expression of a man who has just watched someone step back into the role he had always known they couldn't permanently leave. 2, possibly 3 operatives, he said. Trained and resourced, motivated. They want Doyle's location, they think we have it, or that someone we extracted has it. Barnes is the most likely target for interrogation, which means the OR is the priority. Barnes is the target, she said. She was already moving. Your 2 soldiers at the south perimeter, tell them to hold the exit but not engage. I don't want a firefight in a hospital. Then what do you want? She looked at him over her shoulder. And for the first time tonight, something that was almost not quite, but almost like the woman she used to be showed fully in her face, not hard, not cold, just absolutely certain. I want to go introduce myself, she said. Vance stared at her. They came here for information, she said. They think they're hunting. Let them think that a little longer. She reached the supply corridor door and paused with her hand on it. And John, when this is over, when the building is clear and Barnes is out of the OR and your people have secured the perimeter, you and I are going to sit down in one of those helicopters and you are going to show me everything. Doyle's location, the operation, all of it. That sounds like a yes, he said. That sounds like a woman who doesn't have a choice, she said, which is a different thing entirely. Remember that. She pushed through the door. Behind her, the ER hummed and beeped and breathed its ordinary, extraordinary midnight breath, full of people who were sick and scared and in pain and trying to get through the night, none of them knowing that the quiet nurse who had treated them so carefully and so well for 3 years had just walked away from everything she had built toward everything she had tried to leave behind. And somewhere in the hospital, in the fluorescent hum of an OR suite, Michael Barnes's heart was beating steadily because of those hands that never shook. The South Corridor was the quietest part of St. Jude at this hour. Flora knew that. She had walked it 1,000 times, end of shift, start of shift, the long middle of the night stretches, when she needed 60 seconds of actual silence to reset. She knew which fluorescent panel buzzed slightly off pitch. She knew which supply closet door had a hinge that didn't sit right. She knew the exact sound the floor made under her feet, and more importantly, she knew when that sound was different because someone else had walked it recently. It was different now, not loud, not obvious, just a particular quality of recently disturbed air, the way a space feels when a body has moved through it in the last several minutes. She had learned to read that feeling the way other people learn to read weather, involuntary, bone deep. She stopped at the intersection of the South Corridor in the back maintenance hallway, listened, breathed. There were 2 of them, She was fairly certain of that. The door at the far end, the one with the cut lock, the one Vance's perimeter soldiers had reported was closed again, which meant they had come in and pulled it shut behind them. Deliberately, they were not making a statement. They were trying to disappear inside the building, move quietly toward the OR floor, reach Barnes, before anyone understood what was happening. Smart. Controlled. Exactly the kind of team Cardinal itself would have sent once in a different life to a different building to reach a different target. Flora understood them perfectly. That was in this moment her only real advantage. She moved to the supply closet she knew had the bad hinge and opened it silently. She had fixed that hinge herself 4 months ago with a screwdriver from the maintenance cart because the noise had been driving her quietly insane, and she stepped inside and pulled the door nearly closed behind her and waited. 30 seconds. 40. The sound of footsteps. Measured soft-souled the cadence of people who had been trained to mount in exactly this way. 2 sets. She had been right. She tracked them by sound, building their position in her mind, adjusting the mental map as they moved past her door and continued down the corridor toward the stairwell that led up to the surgical floor. She stepped out behind them. Wrong building, she said. They turned fast. Both of them trained fast. The automatic physical response of people whose instincts have been sharpened to a specific edge. 2 men, dark clothing, compact and capable looking in the way that has nothing to do with size and everything to do with how a person holds themselves when they know how to cause harm. The nearer one had his hand moving toward his shield before he even fully turned. "Don't," she said. Her voice was so calm it was almost conversational. "You're in a hospital. There are patients on the other side of every wall in this building. Whatever you came here to do, you didn't come here to do that." The nearer man's hand stopped. Not because she'd frightened him, because she was right and he knew it, and she had said it in a way that made it clear she knew he knew it. That was a specific kind of communication, the kind that only works between people who have operated in the same world. He recognized it. She saw him recognize it. "Who are you?" he said. Not loud, controlled. "I'm the person standing between you and the floor above us," she said, "which means I'm the only conversation worth having right now." The second man had moved slightly to the side, instinctive flanking, putting her in a split attention position. She tracked him without moving her eyes directly to him, a skill that had taken 2 years to develop and apparently could not be unlearned. "Don't," she said again, this time to the second man. "I see you." A pause was. "You're not hospital security," the nearer man said. "No," she agreed, "and you're not military." He was studying her. She let him. "You're not carrying. You walked out here alone." He tilted his head slightly. "That's either very confident or very stupid." "Or," she said, "I knew that anyone competent enough to track an extraction flight and breach this perimeter was also competent enough to understand that shooting someone in a hospital corridor is a catastrophic operational mistake. And I knew that if I came out here alone and unarmed, I was communicating something specific." She let that sit for exactly 1 second. "I'm communicating that I want to talk." The second man spoke for the first time. His voice was slightly accented Eastern European, she thought, or possibly Central Asian. The specific geography was harder to pin. "There is nothing to talk about." "You came here for Barnes," she said. Neither of them moved. "Barnes doesn't have what you're looking for," she said. "He was extracted in critical condition. He has been unconscious or semi-conscious for the last several hours. Whatever intelligence you think he's carrying, he hasn't been debriefed. He hasn't been able to be debriefed. He doesn't have it in a form that's useful to anyone yet." The nearer man's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. A recalculation. "You're the one who stabilized him," he said. She had not expected from that. She did not let it show. "Yes. They brought the helicopters for you," he said slowly. "Not just for extraction. They came here specifically for you." Another shift in his eyes. Angel 6. The name in his mouth made her stomach tighten. She kept that off her face. "The name is retired." "Names like that don't retire," he said. And there was something in his voice that was almost not respect, not exactly, but an adjacent thing. Recognition. The acknowledgement of one professional for another across a line that divided them. "We were told Angel 6 was dead." "Convenient story," she said. "Goes around." Why are you talking to us? The second man said. Instead of letting the soldiers outside handle this. Because if the soldiers outside handle this, someone gets hurt, she said. Maybe one of yours, maybe one of theirs, maybe a patient on the other side of a wall who has nothing to do with any of this and is just trying to survive a hip replacement. She paused. And because I need information that Vance either doesn't have or won't give me, and I think you might have it. The nearer man stared at her. You want to make a trade. I want to have a conversation, she said, in the next 4 minutes before Vance loses patience and sends 6 people down this corridor, which will make everything worse for everyone. Yes or no? A silence. The two men exchanged a look, the compressed, wordless communication of people who have worked together long enough to have entire conversations without speaking. She knew that look. She had exchanged it herself with Barnes, with Reyes, with Doyle, across the tables in transports and in field positions of 7 years she had tried to call finished. Doyle, the nearer man said. One word, it landed like a stone. What about him? She said. Flat, controlled. She could feel her own pulse, but she managed it, steadied it the way she steadied everything. The man your people are looking for, he said. Daniel Doyle. You think we have him? Do you? Wow, no, he said. She studied him. In 7 years, she had developed a specific skill for reading the particular physical signatures of a lie, the microtensions that most people never learned to control, the almost imperceptible delays between thought and speech. She looked for them now in this man's face and body, with the full focus of everything she had. She did not find them. Then where is he? She said. That, the man said, is the question your Colonel Vance should have been asking 3 days ago, instead of mounting a helicopter operation to retrieve a medical specialist. Something moved through his expression. Not contempt exactly, frustration maybe. The particular frustration of watching a situation be mishandled by people who should know better. Doyle is not in our custody. He was never in our custody. We came here because we also want to find him. The floor shifted under her, not literally, but in the way that floors shift when your understanding of the entire situation reorganizes itself in under 2 seconds. She heard the pieces move. The new configuration was worse than the previous one. Significantly worse. Explain, she said. Doyle made contact with our organization 14 weeks ago, the man said. Voluntarily, with information about Cardinal's current operational targets. He wanted to negotiate a separate arrangement. He was selling information, she said. He said he was preventing a specific operation he believed was wrong, the man said. Whether that is selling or something else, you can judge that yourself. We were in preliminary contact. And then 6 weeks ago, he stopped responding. And then your operation went wrong, and our intelligence indicated that Cardinal suspected a leak. And we understood that Doyle had been, he paused, identified internally. She felt the full weight of it now. You're saying Cardinal made him? We're saying someone inside Cardinal made him, the man said carefully, and it was not Vance. The corridor was very quiet. Somewhere above them in the OR suite, Michael Barnes's heart was beating. Somewhere outside, Vance was counting minutes. Somewhere in the configuration of this conversation, a truth was sitting that was going to change everything she thought she understood about tonight. You're saying someone inside the program turned Doyle in, she said, and it wasn't the Colonel. We're saying that the communication that identified Doyle as a leak did not originate from Vance's level of the organization, the man said. It came from within the team, someone close to him. Reyes, Tanner. The only 2 names Vance had given her. The only 2 active members of her former team still in the field. She heard herself ask the question before she had decided to ask it. Which one? We don't know, the nearer man said, and she believed that too. That is why we are here, not for Barnes. Barnes knows field operations, not internal communications. We came for the communications equipment on the second helicopter. The encrypted relay your people use for internal team coordination. We still believe that the source of the identification is somewhere in that record. She stared at him. He looked back at her steadily. You broke into a hospital, she said, to access a communications relay on a parked helicopter. We came in through the fire exit to avoid your perimeter, yes, he said, which in hindsight was not our best option. She almost laughed. It was not funny. She almost laughed anyway, in the way that the body sometimes finds brief absurdity in the middle of serious things simply to keep itself functional. If someone on the team identified Doyle, she said, thinking aloud now, the pieces moving fast, and Vance didn't know, then Vance has a problem. He came here tonight without understanding he has. Yes, the man said. And Doyle, she stopped. If he was identified 6 weeks ago and he's been missing for 72 hours and he's not with you, he is somewhere that neither side currently controls, the man said, which means he is in a worse position than either your people or mine had believed. The radio on Vance's soldier crackled, faintly distant but audible, and she heard the voice, Alpha Lead, we're at 3 minutes. What's your status on South Corridor? 3 minutes before Vance sent people in, she looked at the two men. She made a decision in the space of one breath, the kind of decision she had made 100 times fast and complete, and lived with afterward, and she said, I'm going to walk you back to the fire exit. My soldiers will let you pass. You're going to leave. The nearer man's eyes narrowed slightly. In exchange, you tell me everything you know about Doyle's last known contact. Time, location, what he communicated. Everything. That takes more than 3 minutes. Then talk fast, she said. He talked. She listened with the absolute focused attention that had been one of her defining professional qualities, the ability to receive information under pressure and retain it perfectly without notes, without recording, the human equivalent of a system with no data loss. He gave her a date, a location that she would need a map to fully contextualize, but could hold in memory until she had one, and a fragment of what Doyle had communicated in his last contact, that the Operation Cardinal was currently running was not what Vance believed it to be, that the target was not the target, that someone above Vance's level had inserted a secondary objective that the field team, including Doyle, had not been briefed on, and that Doyle had intended to bring that information out through channels that would bypass Cardinal entirely. When the man finished, the corridor was completely silent for 3 seconds. Go, she said. They went. She stood in the corridor and breathed once, twice, 3 times, and then she turned and walked back toward the main ER. And by the time she pushed through the door, Vance was already there, already moving toward her with the contained urgency of a man who has been maintaining patience by force and is approaching its limit. The South Corridor is clear, she said before he could speak. He stopped. He read her face. You made contact. I did. Flora, he started again, and she could hear it in his voice. Not anger, not quite, but the particular strain of a commanding officer whose asset has gone off script in a way he cannot categorize as wrong, but also cannot categorize as authorized. I need you to listen to me very carefully, she said. Her voice was quiet as it had been all night. The kind of quiet that Vance, after 7 years, knew meant the opposite of calm. And I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear. And I need you to remember that I have spent 3 years out of this world, which means I have no axe to grind and no side to protect. And when I tell you something, it is because it is true and not because it serves me. He was very still. Tell me. Doyle wasn't taken by the opposition, she said. He was identified internally. Someone on the team turned him in. And whoever it wasn't you, and it wasn't Barnes, and that means the problem is on the ground right now with the people you trust most. The thing that moved through Vance's face in that moment was something she had seen from him exactly once before, years ago, on a night when an operation had gone catastrophically wrong and 3 people had not come home. It was not fear, and it was not grief, and it was not anger. It was a more fundamental thing, the specific disruption of a person whose entire orientation to a situation is suddenly revealed to be wrong, whose map doesn't match the terrain. Reyes or Tanner, he said. The names came out stripped of everything. No inflection, no accusation, just the names set out in the open air like objects to be examined. I don't know which one, she said, but I know where to look. The relay communications. She looked at him. They told you that. And they told you that, he said. And you just told me, which means I'm now several steps behind a conversation that happened in my building without my knowledge. He held her gaze. I'm not angry. You sound angry. He stopped, controlled it. I'm processing the fact that the operation I came here tonight, believing I understood, has just become significantly more complicated. That's not anger, he stopped again. Fear, she said quietly. He didn't deny it. That told her everything. John. She said his name the way she almost never did, direct, without the kernel, without the professional distance they both usually maintain, like a structure between them. I've been out for 3 years. I don't know the current team dynamics. I don't know what's been building. I don't know the specific pressures that have been on these people. But whoever turned Doyle in, they did it 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks and the operation is still running. That means either they don't know they've been exposed, or they do know, Vance said, and they're managing it. And if they're managing it, she said, then every piece of intelligence I've been running this operation on could be compromised, he said. And there it was, the full scale of it. Not just Doyle, not just a missing operative. The entire operational picture potentially built on information that had been curated by someone who knew what they were doing and why. Hennessy appeared at the end of the corridor. His face was professionally neutral, but she could see the effort it was costing him. Barnes is out of surgery, he said. Dr. Park says it went well. He's being moved to recovery. She felt it relief, genuine and deep, moving through her like something released. Barnes was alive. Barnes was stable. Whatever came next, that part was done and it had gone right. Thank you, she said to Hennessy. Thank you for tonight, for all of it. He looked at her for a moment. His expression said several things at once: that he still had 40 questions he would probably never get answers to, that he had decided to be okay with that whatever she was and whatever she was about to do, he had meant what he said about her being real in this building. Take care of yourself, he said. Simple, sincere. I'll try, she said. And then, because some things deserve to be said plainly, you're a good doctor, Paul. This ER is lucky to have you. He nodded, turned and went back to his work, to his patients, to the ordinary, extraordinary labor of keeping people alive, the work she had done alongside him, the work she was walking away from, the work she had genuinely loved in every quiet shift of the 3 years she had spent pretending to be only this. She turned to Vance. The helicopter, she said, the one with the communications relay. I need access. I'll have it ready, he said. And I need everything you have on Reyes and Tanner. Current position, last comms, behavioral flags, anything that looked even slightly off in the last 6 weeks. Everything. Done. And John, she stopped, looked at him directly. If what I find in those communications is what I think I'm going to find, if one of them has been actively running interference while Doyle has been out there alone for 72 hours, you have to be prepared for what that means. Not operationally, personally. These are people you have worked with for years. People you trusted. Vance was quiet for a long moment. She could see him sitting with that feeling, the weight of it, the specific human cost of betrayal at that level in that world. I know, he said finally. Are you prepared for it? He looked at her, and in his face she saw something she had not expected to see from him tonight, or possibly ever. A crack in the absolute composed authority he carried like armor. Something underneath it, tired and human, and genuinely uncertain in a way that John Vance almost never allowed himself to be. No, he said, but I'll do what needs to be done. She nodded. So will I, she said. She walked toward the exit, toward the helicopters, toward the relay and the communications, and the truth buried inside them, and whatever came after that truth, whatever it required, wherever it led, whatever version of herself it was going to demand she be. Behind her, St. Jude Medical Center continued its work. The monitors beeped. The corridors hummed. Sandra Chu moved through the nurses' station with her chin up and her eyes sharp, holding the department together the way she always had and always would. And in a recovery room on the 2nd floor, Michael Barnes breathed slowly and steadily, alive, because of hands that had never forgotten what they were built to do. Flora pushed through the exit door. The cold November air hit her like a fact. The helicopters were waiting. The 2nd helicopter smelled like aviation fuel and old coffee, and the particular metallic tension of equipment that had been running hard for too many hours without rest. Flora climbed in without waiting for an invitation. Vance followed. A young communications specialist, she put him at maybe 25, nervous, in the specific way of someone who has been told that a person of significance is about to sit 3 feet from him, was already at the relay console headset around his neck, hands slightly too still in the way that hands get when their owner is trying to look calm. Out, Vance said to him. The specialist was gone in 4 seconds. Flora sat down in front of the relay console and looked at it. The hardware was newer than what she had used, but the architecture was the same. Cardinal had always been conservative about its communications infrastructure, updating incrementally rather than wholesale, because wholesale changes created new vulnerabilities, and Cardinal had spent years building an encrypted network with no vulnerabilities worth speaking of. She knew this system. Not this exact version, but its bones, its logic. Password tier, she said. I'll authorize your access, Vance said. He leaned past her, entered a long sequence, stepped back. You have full read access to the last 90 days of internal team comms. I need the administrative logs too, not just the message content, the metadata, transmission times, routing paths, which terminal initiated each communication. That requires a higher authorization level than you gave me, she said. Yes, give it to me anyway. A pause. She heard him make the decision, felt it more than heard it, the specific quality of silence that accompanies a person crossing a line they have considered carefully and crossed deliberately. He leaned past her again. Second sequence. Longer. There, he said. She went to work. This was a different kind of work. From the trauma bay, quieter, more interior, the body almost still while the mind moved fast. She pulled the administrative logs for the last 6 weeks and began reading the way she had been trained to read operational data, not linearly, not looking for the obvious, but pattern first, looking for the shape of things. What communicated when? What routes traffic took? Where the rhythm broke? Vance sat behind her and said nothing. She appreciated that more than she could have articulated. 4 minutes in, she found the first anomaly. It was small. A routing irregularity on a message sent 43 days ago from a terminal identified as TN7 Tanner's field terminal that had taken a path through the relay network 2 steps longer than the direct route. Not impossible. Network congestion equipment issues a dozen innocent explanations. She flagged it mentally and kept moving. 7 minutes in, she found the second anomaly. Same terminal, same indirect routing, different day. 9 minutes in, the third. Tanner, she said. Vance was very still behind her. Show me. She walked him through it, the routing irregularities, the pattern, the specific signature of messages that were taking the long way around the network, because the long way passed through a node that was not exclusively Cardinals. A node that someone with the right technical knowledge had set up as a secondary listener. It was elegant work, patient work, the kind of work that takes weeks to build and is designed to be invisible. It had been invisible for 43 days. He built a tap, she said, inside the relay. Everything that passed through the network, every internal communication, every operational update, every personnel movement was being mirrored to an external address. She paused. Including 6 weeks ago, the internal flag on Doyle. Vance said her name. Just her name, nothing else. The way a person says a word when a word is all they can manage. Tanner identified Doyle, she said, not to protect the operation. I need to look at something else. Hold on. She moved through the logs faster now, following the thread pulling at it. The messages Doyle sent to the opposition, the ones where he said the operation's target wasn't the real target. I need to find whether Tanner knew about those before he flagged Doyle. Why does that matter? Vance said. His voice was compressed, tight. Because if Tanner knew about Doyle's communications before he flagged him, it means Tanner didn't turn Doyle in to protect Cardinal. She found the timestamp she was looking for. Stopped. He turned Doyle in to protect the secondary objective, the one Doyle was trying to expose. The silence in the helicopter was the kind that has mass. What secondary objective? Vance said. Quietly, the quietest she had ever heard him. That's what I'm trying to... She stopped. She had found it. Not in the message content, which was encrypted in layers she would need more time and more tools to fully parse, but in the metadata, in the pattern of what was communicated when and to whom, and what operational movements followed each communication. She could read the shape of it even without the content, like reading the shadow of an object without seeing the object itself. She sat back. John, she said, the Operation Cardinal is running right now, the one Barnes and Doyle and the others have been in the field for. What were you told it was? Surveillance and extraction of a specific intelligence asset, he said. High-value foreign national willing to defect. And the asset's location? A safe house in, he stopped himself, old habit location security. Then because it was her, and because the moment had moved past certain protocols, northern coastal region, remote. Remote, she repeated. Remote enough that a secondary team could be operating in the same general area without your primary team's knowledge. The pause that followed was different from the others. Longer, heavier. She could hear Vance breathing, controlled, deliberate, the breathing of a man who is keeping himself functional by force. There is no secondary team, he said. I didn't authorize above your pay grade, she said. You used that phrase earlier tonight. Remember, he remembered. She could feel it. The authorization for Cardinals reclassification, she said, levels above you, and now there's a secondary objective running inside your operation that you weren't briefed on being protected by one of your own people, which means whoever authorized that objective had access to your team, had a relationship with someone on your team. She paused. Tanner has been with Cardinal how long? 11 years, Vance said. Longer than me, she said. Yes. Longer than Doyle. Yes. Long enough to have developed relationships above your level, she said. Long enough to be someone's person inside the program. Not a recent turn, a long-standing arrangement. She let that land fully before continuing. Doyle found out what the secondary objective was. That's why he reached out to the opposition. Not because he went bad, because he found something inside the operation that he believed was wrong, and he didn't trust internal channels to expose it, and he was right not to trust them, because the internal channel he would have used was compromised. He would have come to me, Vance said, quietly. He should have come to me. Maybe he didn't know how far it went, she said. Maybe he wasn't sure you weren't part of it. She said it gently, not to wound him, but because it needed to be said. When you're inside something and you find rot, you can't always tell where the rot ends. Vance was quiet for a long time, long enough that she turned to look at him. He was sitting with his hands flat on his knees, looking at nothing, looking inward at the specific interior landscape of a man reassembling his understanding of 11 years of work and trust and decision-making. She had seen that look on people before. It was one of the hardest looks to witness. The look of someone discovering that the map they navigated by had been drawn wrong deliberately by someone they trusted with the drawing. Where is Doyle? He said finally. I don't know yet, she said, but I know who does. She turned back to the console. Navigated to Tanner's most recent communications the last 72 hours, the hours during which Doyle had been missing. The routing irregularities were still there. And in the last transmission 41 hours ago, something new, a message routed not just through the secondary listener node, but originating from it. Tanner hadn't just been mirroring outward. In the last 41 hours he had been receiving. Someone had been talking to him. She isolated the originating address of that inbound communication and stared at it. She didn't recognize the specific identifier, but she recognized the format. It was a location beacon, a field beacon. Someone in the field using Cardinal-adjacent equipment had transmitted to Tanner's terminal 41 hours ago. This beacon format, she said, is this standard issue for your current field teams? Vance looked over her shoulder. Yes, he said. Then, no, wait. He leaned closer. That's an older format. We phased that out 2 years ago. Current teams are on the updated protocol. But someone with access to legacy equipment, she said, or someone who has been in the field long enough to have held on to legacy kit, he said, and she heard it happen in his voice, the shift from processing to understanding. Doyle has been transmitting, she said, moved to the main relay to Tanner's terminal specifically, which means either he doesn't know Tanner is compromised, or he does know, Vance said, and he's feeding Tanner false position data, using himself as bait. He exhaled, a long, compressed, almost disbelieving sound. That absolute, he stopped himself. But she heard the emotion underneath it, relief and fear and pride and fury all compressed into the space of one controlled exhale. That's exactly what he'd do. We need Tanner's current position, she said. He's at the operational base, Vance said. 40 minutes from here by air. Then we're 40 minutes from Doyle, she said. She stood up, turned to face Vance fully. And the thing between them, the years, the history, the complicated weight of everything that had brought them both to this helicopter in an Oregon hospital parking lot at 2 in the morning, settled into something that was almost simple, almost clear. I need you to do something before we move, she said. I need you to call your people at the operational base and tell them nothing. Not about Tanner, not about the secondary objective, nothing. If Tanner knows we're coming, Doyle's position, wherever he actually is, gets transmitted to people we can't identify, and whatever leverage Doyle has built for himself disappears. Agreed, Vance said immediately. And I need you to accept, she continued, that when this is over, when Doyle is out and Tanner is contained and whatever secondary objective is running inside your operation is exposed, there are going to be people above your level who are going to want this quiet, who are going to want Doyle quiet and the opposition contacts quiet and me quiet, and all of it buried back under the same classified layers it came from. Vance met her eyes. Yes, he said, there will be. I won't be quiet, she said. I want you to understand that going in. I know, he said. That's not a problem for you. He looked at her for a long moment. I came to Oregon tonight to find the best person I know, he said. I found her. What she does with what she finds that was always going to be outside my control. I made peace with that somewhere over Idaho on the way here. She studied him, believed him. Okay, she said. She moved toward the helicopter door, stopped. John, she said. Her voice was different now, not the colonel, not the command structure, just two people who had spent 7 years keeping each other and other people alive in impossible places. Whatever Tanner's reasons are, whatever they told him, whatever they offered him, whatever story they built around the secondary objective to make it something he could live with, I need you to be ready to hear it, not to forgive it, just to hear it. Because if we go in there already decided we make mistakes, he held her gaze. You were always the one who could do that, he said. Hold both things at once. The person did wrong and the person is still a person. It's not generosity, she said. It's tactics. Decided people are blind people. Maybe, he said, but I've watched you do it for 7 years and I've always thought it was more than tactics. She didn't answer that. She pushed the helicopter door open and dropped down to the ground and straightened up in the cold November air. And for one moment, just one, she let herself feel the full weight of what had happened in this parking lot, in this hospital, in this night. She had come to work at 11 p.m. as Flora Montgomery nurse, anonymous, invisible, a woman with a turkey sandwich and a face-down photograph, and a life built on the discipline of smallness. She was leaving as something else. Not Angel 6, she was not ready to take that name back, might never be, but not purely Flora Montgomery either. Something in between. Something that had been forced into existence by 8 helicopters and a man's critical heartbeat, and a truth buried in a communications relay that could not be allowed to stay buried. She heard boots behind her Vance and 2 of his soldiers moving toward the forward helicopter. She heard the rotors beginning to spin up. She heard faintly through the hospital walls the ordinary sounds of St. Jude continuing its night. She thought of Sandra. She thought of Hennessy. She thought of Mr. Garrett in room 14, who always called everyone honey, who had noticed when her hands paused at a window. She thought of the photograph in her locker. Face down. 3 years face down. She went back inside. She walked the corridor fast past the nurse's station, where Sandra looked up and saw her face and read it immediately. Sandra always read everything immediately and stood up from her chair. You're going, Sandra said. Yes, Flora said. She went to her locker, opened it, took out the water bottle, took out the photograph. She looked at it for the first time in 3 years. 7 people standing in a line somewhere unidentifiable in gear that told nothing and everything. She was second from the left. Barnes was beside her. Doyle was at the far end laughing at something. His whole face changed the way it always changed when he laughed. Rhea stood straight and still. Tanner was smiling, easy and genuine and completely unreadable, now in retrospect, now that she knew and now that she was carrying the weight of what she had found in those communications logs. She put the photograph in her chest pocket, closed the locker, turned around. Sandra was standing 2 feet away. She had followed her silently, which was something Flora had not heard, and which told her that 3 years of deliberate anonymity had softened certain edges she was going to need to sharpen again. I meant what I said, Sandra told her. You were real here. I know, Flora said. So were you. Sandra reached out and briefly firmly squeezed her arm. The gesture of a person who has decided that words are not enough and physical honesty is better. Flora let herself receive it, stood in it for 2 full seconds. Then she stepped back. Take care of Barnes when he's out of recovery. He'll be difficult. All the good ones are, Sandra said. Flora almost smiled. Almost. Yeah, she said. They are. She walked out. The helicopter was ready. Vance was aboard. The 2 soldiers were strapped in, and the rotors were at full speed, and the cold air was pressing everything flat and loud and immediate. She climbed in and pulled the door, and the ground fell away beneath them, and the lights of St. Jude Medical Center shrank and then became a pattern among other patterns in the dark Oregon landscape below. She held the photograph in her hand, looked at Doyle's laughing face, looked at Tanner's easy smile. 40 minutes. 40 minutes to an operational base where a man she had trusted for years was sitting with a secret that had put another man she had trusted alone in the field for 72 hours. 40 minutes to whatever Tanner's reasons were, whatever his story was, whatever truth or lied or compromise he had built his last 11 years on top of. 40 minutes to Doyle. Alive, she believed he was alive. She was choosing to believe it with the full, deliberate force of someone who understands that belief is sometimes the only tool available and that using it is not weakness, but necessity. She put the photograph away. Vance was watching her from across the helicopter. She could feel it without looking. What are you thinking? And he said, over the rotor noise, just loud enough. She thought about that honestly, about what she was actually thinking underneath the operational planning, underneath the tactical map she was already building in her mind, underneath all of it. I'm thinking that Doyle spent 6 weeks alone with something he couldn't trust anyone inside the program to hear, she said, and that he found a way to keep himself alive anyway, and that when this is over, I'm going to tell him that he should have come to me. She paused. Even from a faked death in Oregon, he should have found a way to come to me. Would you have come back for that? Vance asked. She thought about it. About the apartment, the Honda Civic, the vending machine turkey sandwich. The photograph face down, never turned over. Yes, she said. For Doyle, yes. Vance nodded slowly. The helicopter moved through the dark at speed. Below them, Oregon spread out cold and quiet and enormous. Ahead of them, 40 minutes of truth that was going to cost something she did not know yet exactly what. But she had never in her life navigated one of these situations without a cost, and she had long since made her peace with that mathematics. The cost was real, and it was paid, and you paid it, and you kept moving. That was what she did, what she had always done, what she was apparently irrevocably still going to do. At the operational base, Tanner was sitting with his secret in his 11 years in his compromised terminal, unaware that the relay he had built his betrayal on had already given him up. Unaware that 40 minutes away a helicopter was cutting through the dark toward him. Unaware that the person aboard it was not the anonymous night shift nurse he had perhaps heard rumors of, not the quiet woman in Oregon that the program had long since written off as gone. Unaware that Angel 6, whatever that name meant, whatever it cost her, whatever she had decided or not decided about carrying it was coming. And Flora Montgomery, who had spent 3 years being invisible and had stopped being invisible the moment 8 helicopters shook the ground beneath her feet, sat in the dark with her hands in her lap and looked at nothing, and felt for the first time in 3 years absolutely, precisely, terribly clear. She was not going back to what she was. She was going forward into what she had always been. And whatever came next, the truth inside Tanner's terminal, Doyle in the field, the secondary objective, and the people above Vance's pay grade who had authorized it, the long reckoning that was waiting at the end of all of this, she would meet it the same way she met everything, with steady hands, with clear eyes, without flinching.